Is it going to rain? Seems like it is in many ways. Although I'm kind of hoping they get rid of all the rain earlier, because then I'll be able to go to that hike and stuff on the weekend and fly the drone. That's if the weather holds up as usual. I probably won't be getting the extra battery in time for sure. Just got another message from the DJI. Basically, it says 5 business days and more to get the new battery. Makes me wonder if they actually repair this stuff or if they're just gonna send me like a brand new one. There was a delightful surprise yesterday too, as I was uploading my vlog for the day. Basically, I got notified that XJet, he basically gave me a shout out for the channel. Hopefully, I guess in many ways that's good, because hopefully that helps to bring up the awareness of all these drone issues and all that. It's kind of cool in many ways, because I would consider a person like this an actual authority when it comes to talking about things like drones, as opposed to, say, the transport minister. So that's kind of cool to get a shout out like this and to raise the awareness. So thanks again for the shout out. The main news that caught my attention today, anybody else read this? Drone getting shot by a gun in Canada here. Yep, I guess it was just a matter of time, right? In this case, from what I gathered from reading the news reports, it's something about a 13-year-old kid, I believe, was flying a drone within their own property. And then for some reason, somebody shot it, and I guess the drone, fell down and all that. And it says here the person was going to be charged under mischief for like $5,000, and they're supposed to appear in court. It's kind of an interesting topic in many ways, because even the stuff that you guys sent me before, you were saying how in some communities they're actually posting stuff about drones and how people are even joking about shooting them. And I guess it kind of plays into the role of public hysteria and all that as well. I mean, I was wondering last time, why do people think it's so normal to like say take a gun and shoot a drone in this case? I mean, to my understanding too, these people were flying within their own properties, and then for some reason the person just felt like, I guess, socially it's okay to shoot a drone down. Like, would it be just because, it's just this guy that's dumb, for example? Or is it because of all the hysteria you see in the media, people think it's okay because the drone is perceived as something, evil or negative, if that makes sense? Brings me to the topic I talked about before. What's more dangerous? The propaganda in trying to demonize a tech, or the drone themselves? Interestingly enough, in many ways, this all kind of relates to the comment that I read that one of you guys posted, which I thought was an interesting discussion, just about drones and people putting their voices out there to get change. So Dan here, you were basically describing how in many ways you feel my videos, for example, is doing the public a disservice in terms of trying to create the change, whereas you feel there's a better way to do it. So I thought, yeah, again, it would be interesting to actually talk about. Okay, so you say here, for example, I think how you are portraying the issue is doing somewhat of a disservice to the problem. You are in a position to be the voice of reason and as a vehicle for the dissemination of information and reason. I'm actually curious about this, because I know there's probably like a lot of new people that come in. How many videos did you actually watch before you came to this conclusion? Just speaking for myself, for example, in terms of like some videos that I published, all of them are actually kind of like in a different style, I guess you can say, because everyone resonates with information differently, if that makes sense. Like for example, some of them may just be about the laws, posting the emails and so forth. Some of them may be just me going on the hikes and showing people what a drone is like, so they have nothing to fear. So again, yeah, I'm kind of curious in that sense. Now you mentioned, for example, you do not feel that ridiculing lawmakers like Transport Canada and Mark Garneau is basically productive in any ways to basically get to the middle ground, if that makes sense, to work together. And in terms of ridiculing, I mean, just for my personal opinion, for me, it's more about, if you want to use that word ridiculing, it's more about ridiculing the context, like the message. Like for me personally, I don't say, for example, oh, Mark Garneau, like I'm gonna make fun of the way he, I don't know, his food, whatever type of food he eats, for example. I don't make fun of, like, say, a Transport Canada employee specifically, like, say, I don't know, maybe their hobby is this, so I'm gonna make fun of their hobby. Like, to me personally, that would be a little overboard and, off topic. But in context, and what I think personally a lot of people need is to showcase just how ridiculous the laws are. And sometimes, I mean, you just can't help but to laugh about it in many ways. I mean, did anyone else see like those videos I showed before where when I was trying to find, like, say, what is the formal way to do this, like contact the MPs and all that, the first video I bumped into were people of Parliament arguing about the word fart. But generally speaking, in terms of like meeting in the middle, there's just a problem right now in terms of things like elitism, if that's what you want to call it. Basically, some people's voices aren't being heard as loudly or effectively as, say, someone that's buddy-buddy, let's say, with the Transport Canada or the Transport Minister or whatever. Like, I mean, that's just a fact right now if you look at it in many ways. like back to that example of the people in the parliament, like, oh my goodness, arguing about the word fart over and over again. Like, do you consider that ridiculing when I emphasize the point that they are arguing about something that's stupid as an example? Like, I feel in many ways the public, they need to see stuff like this because they're projecting themselves right now, like in this situation with the drones, is we're doing it all for your safety. Everything we're doing is like fact checked and all that, but if you check it, it's so contradicting, it's so ridiculous that you have no choice but to further emphasize the point. Now, basically, you go into your explanation, basically trying to explain in your perspective, there are 4 groups of people here. Like, for example, the government, the public, the responsible flyers, and the people who are irresponsible about flying. And it's a matter of trying to get all these people together, if that makes sense. Okay, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this because this might be a little fundamentally different in terms of the way you think and I think personally. Like, this might be a case of agree to disagree. But I don't agree it's broken up into 4 sections. I believe it's 2 in many ways. The government and the public. Now you maybe say like, wait, what are you talking about? Like the government and the public? Because for me, one of the big issues in my opinion with the drones here is the fact that the government is dividing people. They're saying, hey, the public, like you're this normal person, this drone guy, dangerous. So they're basically creating a division. Whereas for me, in my mind, like, why are you doing that? I am the public. I am an everyday guy. I just happen to fly a drone. Why are you separating me from everybody else? I mean, it might sound ridiculous now, but I even mentioned before, I mean, think of the example. Let's pretend people have a hysteria over smartphones or whatever. Like people are afraid of, let's say, the camera on the smartphones. Don't you think it'll be a little weird, like if you think of it nowadays, to say it's the government versus the public to the smartphone users? To that, nowadays, you're like, what? That doesn't make sense. In my opinion, that's how the drones are, and it shouldn't be that way right now. In my opinion, the government is the big reason for this, this division. Because that goes to your point here. You say Transport Canada does not care about the responsible flyer, but they do have to care about the rights of others. Again, that's a point that I personally disagree with because, again, you're creating this division. I mean, Transport Canada does not care about the responsible flyer. You should care because they are just like everyone else. I mean, look at the example of that story today of someone's drone getting shot with a gun. As Transport Canada, you should be equally as concerned for this responsible drone flyer. Why shouldn't you be? Doesn't that sound a little ridiculous? I mean, they don't, last I read, when like they're a public body, for example, in terms of a public service, you should be protecting everybody. If there's a crazy guy with a gun and so forth, are you telling me, okay, I'm gonna protect that guy with the crazy gun, but not the responsible drone flyer? That doesn't make sense. I mean, one of the biggest issues I'm surprised people don't push out more, because like I'm not a lawyer, for example, so I don't have the expertise on like, you know, to talk about stuff like that in detail. But the issue about like the privacy, for example, I mean, you as like the Transport Canada, for example, you should have a responsibility to protect the flyers. I mean, imagine this situation, 13-year-old kid. Are you telling me that 13-year-old kids is supposed to write their name, their address, their telephone number all on the front of the drone? I mean, there are crazy people like this that basically took a gun and they shot the drone. You're telling me it's not their responsibility to help protect people like that? Okay, now you did go into further clarification saying, for example, you know, the bottom line is rather than simply ridiculing like the laws and all that, try to partner with them to inform them. Again, maybe this will be a little bit of a difference in terms of mindset, but when you say partner with them, like I assume anyways, like correct me if I'm wrong, you mean like government, like I should partner with Transport Canada, for example, to try to change these laws, so I should be extra nice, if that makes sense. I mean, I agree, for the most part, that's how it should be done, but if you think about it, they're the ones that are demonizing the tech. They're dividing people, saying like, in a sense, recreational drone flyers, you guys are so dangerous that I had no choice but to bring this out. So they separated it, if you think about it. And to my knowledge, from a lot of people's effort, it's basically going on deaf ears. So for me, in general, in terms of my target, like the people that I'm trying to work with, if that makes sense, is the general public. Because in many ways, that's the weapon that they're using, is the general public, basically creating this hysteria to justify these dumb drone laws in many ways. And these are the types of people that for myself, I actually try to change their minds, if that makes sense, to make them more open-minded. That's why I do things like, for example, go on the hikes with the drone. I even said many times, like again, I don't know how many videos you've actually watched, but when I go hiking, for example, someone who's never seen a drone before, they're so terrified. They automatically assume like, oh, this thing is gonna like fly like crazy, you know, hit something. But as soon as I show them it, they're like, wow, this thing is so steady. After they see the videos, the footage, like, wow, I love this thing now. And guess what? They're like, are you available next time to come with me so I can capture the footage? So that's what I try to do personally in terms of working with people. And I agree, like you say, basically there's a segment of people within our community, like say the drone flyers are causing the problems. Like I fully agree. That's why basically I always say, for example, punish the people in general that are breaking the laws or whatever. Don't go after the whole group. I mean, I obviously haven't been in this RC hobby, if that's what you want to call it, as long as you. Like you say, 3 decades. I only started when the Mavic Pro came out, because for me, basically I didn't start by building RCs or anything like that. For me, it was about, I wanted something for my lifestyle, like a camera, for example, so I can go around when I hiked. So many times I was there saying, I really wanted good footage of this, and I thought it would be great to share it with the world. Like you and I, we come from different backgrounds, we have different reasons to fly this, but I think the bottom line is, like, I think we all agree, and for the most part, those laws are pretty dumb in many ways. Actually, for this point, I don't disagree with you fully. Like, basically, you were explaining in your view what changed to bring out these laws, for example, is you're saying basically the influx of easy-to-fly drones in the hands of some people who do not wish to respect the rights of others. Again, I actually don't disagree with this fully, because there are idiots that buy stuff like that, and we need to educate them so they don't ruin the hobby for everyone else. At the same time, in my personal opinion, I try to look at all perspectives. I personally, I don't believe that is the only issue, for example. I mean, just to stay open-minded, I don't doubt, for example, there are some things, maybe money's involved. I actually don't doubt that. Like, you might say it's crazy, but I don't doubt that for one fact. I mean, look at how they made up the laws in general. It was like a board full of what? Commercial pilots? Where's the recreational people? I mean, it might not have to be that crazy, like if this is a Hollywood movie or something like that, but I wouldn't doubt if that was a factor where even though these laws are out there for the commercial people, it's kind of like, it doesn't bother me, why not? It means more business anyway, so I'm not going to put in an effort to say, for example, these laws are ridiculous. Like, I don't put it past. I put everything on the table to try and justify these laws, because to me, it doesn't make sense. If you say it's about safety, they should be banning everything with the narrative that they have in terms of what kind of disaster it can create. I mean, it's the unfortunate, sad reality in almost any industry you can think of where stuff like that happens. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And until someone shows otherwise, I mean, I keep an open mind. It could be anything. Again, it just doesn't make sense if this narrative is a safety, considering, again, like when it comes to crashing into airplanes, I've never seen or read a story of a drone crashing an airplane here in Canada, so why this all of a sudden? I mean, wasn't there a plane that crashed like almost like the day after, for example, when these interim drone laws were announced? Like, why don't you ban planes all of a sudden? Weird double standard. I mean, you explained to me. I mean, I'm a rational person. I try to base things on the facts, so I mean, please educate me. A little thought about the point where you say it's kind of our job to police ourselves as well. I actually agree with that. Unfortunately, in this situation, the government decided to police us instead and take away the ability for, like, say, someone like me to police it, if that's what you want to call it. I mean, if they wanted to work with someone like myself, for example, before making these laws, they would actually consult, again, with the recreational drone flyers, saying, okay, this is our concern, guys. What do you think we can do about this? And if you can't do anything about it, then we'll do something about it, like if that makes sense. But that wasn't the case. It was just, okay, here it is, push. Take it or leave it. And on the topic of self-policing, you mentioned about that red deer incident. Like, again, in terms of the videos, I'm curious, did you actually watch that video that I made about the red deer person? Like, even there, personally, for me, in my opinion, I criticized him saying, okay, you're a guy that's really tech savvy, obviously. He runs a film company, apparently, and you're telling me all this factoring together, you were not aware of the regulations? Like, even I was saying, like, even for me, like, the first time I bought my drone, I was trying to do my research. Like, the first thing I did was search, like, okay, where can I fly this? What's the regulation in terms of weight? And people in Alberta were complaining, like, so many in the sections they can't fly. I guess, like, what you say here. So for me, it's a little bit, okay, it's a little bit of a stretch there to try to believe you. But like there, same thing. I give everyone equal treatment, if that makes sense, in terms of my criticism. This is actually an interesting thought. You were saying here, despite what you might think, I think the interim regs are reasonable. Basically, and then explaining how, like, on the positive side, they could have placed a whole ban on it, like some countries do. Okay, I guess in that sense, I fundamentally disagree with that, because in this situation, they basically took the rights away, if that makes sense. Like something that was already working in a sense, maybe not perfect, but it was working enough to give them time to pan the regulations out to make it more safe, you want to call it. But instead, they just took it away. Now, for me personally, to be in a position and say, oh, I should be grateful they just didn't ban it completely. Well, does that make sense? If someone takes something away from you, then afterwards you're grateful that they give you like a little bit back? And in general too, like in terms of the rules, it pretty much is like a straight up ban in most ways if you think about it, because you can't fly anywhere for most people. I mean, for me, it's a little different. Like, I enjoy hiking and taking the sceneries with the videos and all that, but I'm thinking about other people too. Why should they have to hike for like 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers just to fly the thing, where some people aren't even interested in the video aspect of flying this stuff? To me, that's unfair. Like, again, I have to think of more than just myself. I have to think of everybody. I guess another way to think about it, just to make the point a little bit more clear, like for example, you are all here right now because of like YouTube. For example, I'm publishing videos, you're having a conversation, whereas in some countries they completely ban that. You're actually not allowed to use it in general. So if for some reason, like all these years, people were enjoying coming on the World Wide Web here, making videos and all that, now all of a sudden the government takes it away and say, okay, for the safety of all the children and everything that's bad on the internet, the only sites you can visit are government sites. Like, should I sit there and say, yes, thank you, Canadian government, for giving me the privilege of visiting your site? You could have just banned like everything in general, but you allow me to visit your site. Yes, thank you. Like that, no way. Like, that's an exaggeration, but you know, hopefully you get the point. Maybe it's just me, as I said, I don't follow politics that much, but I would imagine it should be the other way around, where they should be grateful to even have the job to represent people. Because isn't it a person like myself where they get their income from, where we pay taxes? Aren't they supposed to represent us? Why should I be grateful, for example, if they're making these ridiculous laws? I mean, aren't they supposed to be the voice of the majority, if that makes sense? I mean, that makes me wonder again, who the heck did they talk to? I mean, it definitely wasn't recreational drone flyers like myself. I mean, was it only commercial flyers, for example, or people who already have some kind of established area to fly where they don't care? I mean, they should be listening to everybody. Now, about your last point in terms of contacting people, for example, like the MPs and all that, you can contact Trudeau. I mean, people have done that. I mean, they created petitions and stuff, if I'm not mistaken. Even in one of my very first types of videos about this whole issue, I've actually supported people that were doing the petitions. Although, even though in my mind, I still feel people should focus a lot more in general or equal to the general public as opposed to just this formal way. And people have done it this formal way. I mean, the other Dan, the other day, showed me like the email that they received, and for the most part, it was a template response. And I still remember, even like Melissa says here, for example, she got the exact same response, a template response, and she was, in a sense, disappointed about this. And I still remember back on Melissa, she was asking me before, and she was saying like, oh, where did you read this law? And I directed her to a forum, and she was expressing how she's going to send him, like, not Trudeau, what's his name? Garneau, okay? He was going to send Garneau like a polite letter and stuff, and this is the response she got. I mean, for me personally, that was kind of the response I was expecting them to send for the most part, when there isn't that public support, that public pressure, if that makes sense. But I didn't stop and say, no, I'm not doing it that way. I mean, I did support it. I basically said, hey, go sign that petition. I signed it myself. But in many ways, in terms of the result, I mean, can't you say this was the result of doing it the formal way so far? I mean, in my opinion, there's room for everything. Just everything has to work cohesively. I mean, maybe it's just my way of thinking, but it's kind of like a corporation that has a monopoly, for example. I mean, all the employees and so forth, they can go up to them all they want all day saying they want things to change, but most likely they won't if it doesn't affect their bottom line, if that makes sense. But as soon as something gets out there that affects that, then they will change their tunes. I mean, United Airline incident, anyone? I mean, is that not a classic story example of when people, like, whatever, get really mad about an issue, you better believe they'll start changing. And I think it's no different personally in terms of like these laws and all that. But in my opinion anyways, that's just about people contributing in different ways. Because in many ways, maybe you are very formal as an example. You have the experience to do it that way, and I support that. That's why I supported people with the petitions and all that. At the same time, I think people have to give support to the regular, average, everyday person as well in terms of voicing their opinion. Because in many ways, people are judging this issue irrationally in an emotional way just due to factors like how the government are fear-mongering people about drones. And in order to change that perspective in many ways, unfortunately, for like the general public, the formal, super formal way isn't necessarily the most effective or the only way you should do it. Like going back with the privacy issue, I mean, I would imagine if that was in any other category in Canada, like can you imagine if the government says everyone that has a car has to put their full name and address and all that? I would imagine every Canadian would be like, are you crazy? And they'll change it right away. I mean, the fact that they didn't change something like that right away just shows me, personally, they don't feel the pressure in terms of the need to do that. I mean, obviously this can't happen, but in some silly ways, I mean, if Garneau was so okay with people publishing all their full names and address on the front of the drone for everyone to see, would he be okay if everyone in Canada branded their car, wore t-shirts that just said nothing but his full name, his address, his contact number, all these personal details, and people don't even need to say anything? Just walk out in the street like casual, just wearing this, and everyone will see it. Would he be okay with that? I bet you he'd probably phone the authorities right away because it's not acceptable. So hopefully that makes sense. In general, I guess it just comes down to right now it's about perspective. I mean, I think we're all on the same side equally. I guess it's just a matter of what is the most effective way, as you say. I mean, for me, in my mindset, it's just about exposing the facts at this point. If it turns out to be funny and ridiculous, I mean, in many ways, since like for a person like myself, I am trying to educate the public, I think you need that. I think that was a healthy conversation, wasn't it? Give me your thoughts, like whatever you think afterwards. Again, the conversation is good. Anyway, see you guys later.